And bang, we're recording.
Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. This is One Square at a Time, and I almost did the other podcast intro. One Square at a Time. It's a leadership perspective of being able to fill your tool belt with everything to help you be the best you can be from the King's perception, moving one square at a time. I am honored to have with me again Mr. Brett Gordon. How are you, sir?
Excellent. Had a great time coming out to be with my girlfriend for Christmas, so it was really nice to be able to do that.
That's awesome. Did you get to do anything special down in Chicago?
Actually, we went over to her two sons' places, and I had a chance to talk with them, and that was great as well. So, like I say, it was nice. It was pretty quiet, comparatively speaking, and a lot less stressful than when I'm at home with mom and dad.
So I went to visit my family on the east side of Cleveland, and I don't spend the night very often, but Christmas Eve, my parents take it very personally if you don't spend the night. And Sarah, my fiance, did not. And they've always been like, towards that. But I understand what you're saying about the parents, because I was only home for 3 days, and I'm like, I would rather live in my car than ever move back in with my parents. Like, they just, I love my mom and dad, but wow, do they have a different way of handling things than I do. So you got to meet my buddy Chai, Adrian.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Isn't he a pistol?
Yeah, we had a great conversation. He and I got to talking about all different kinds of things and start talking about guns and those types of things. And
he and you, I knew would get along. I was like, oh, they're going to get along great. Like that. I saw that you two would have fun together and all that. So
yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely.
So this week's
adjustment here.
No, you're good.
All right.
This week's episode, you and I were talking a couple weeks ago about doing Deadpool, and I'm excited for Deadpool. It's one of my favorite characters. It's just because he's different than everybody else. It's how do I put this? His smart assery, but he knows he still has to be a good guy deep down inside. I already see the face. This is going to be fun. So you did not ever see Deadpool before, correct?
No, I had started watching it maybe once or twice, and I think it was kind of just the way it started and the smart assery and the violence and stuff, and I was like, I'm not sure that this one is just the way that I look at superheroes, so I didn't finish watching it. But today I actually did, and I was it was very interesting. And then after doing some thinking about it afterwards and how we're going to talk about it today, I was like, wow, this can get really deep really fast. Because of what I am kind of identifying as, what may be his superpower.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the obvious one of him being able to kind of live, through just about anything.
Correct.
But then it gets deep from there, and it kind of ties into what we talked about last week too. So it should be interesting.
Interesting. So you wanted my perception of Deadpool. Honestly, the actor picked was one of my favorite actors. I have watched Ryan Reynolds for years in many different films, and it's just an actor that he plays such different roles that he can go from being the biggest douche to being the greatest guy. And you're like, what the? He is an inspiration to me because of the fact he really does want to give back to a lot of people and do the right thing. Even the businesses he owns today, he owns a cell phone company, a vodka company. He owns a whole bunch of different things. And every single one of them is focused on being able to work with and help other people. And his vodka company is meant to bring jobs to other people. Like he sees what he's here for, and that's why I like him as the actor. I saw this role as more of a, I bet you haven't even seen this, Van Wilder.
Yeah.
So I pictured this would have been Van Wilder if he didn't actually do all the partying. He'd have to have become a superhero to be able to get through everything.
And if he stayed away from the eclairs.
Exactly. Yes. Stay away from eclairs. But he, in that movie, he found himself. And that's why I enjoyed Van Wilder, where this as a superhero, him being able to live forever is one thing, but I think seeing how much love he had for his girl, how they connected with different things, and how he wanted her to be happy because he didn't think he'd be able to make her happy looking the way he did. Yeah. So I looked at that and I'm like, he's not seeing who he is, and he's letting that influence all of that. And I thought to myself how much people aren't noticing that in the movie. They're noticing him pushing her away, but they're not connecting it like that. For me, this movie was Ryan Reynolds / Deadpool. I'm going to stick to that from here because it's the fact that he's in that corner. I keep seeing Ryan and I'm like, but Deadpool is a character that, or a superhero. Superhero's a lot for him. He doesn't even want to be a superhero. Right. And that's the thing is like, I personally think for him, he is a very negative thinker and he thinks he has to do these things because he's stuck living forever and nobody else will, but he doesn't do it with wanting to help. He does it because he has to.
Right.
So I'm curious what your interpretations or how you felt the movie went.
Well, it was interesting, and it actually ties in on quite a bit with what you were just saying. Here I'm watching this character and how he became Deadpool, and going from the beautiful Ryan Reynolds face to Deadpool, and believing that defined him, and as a result, he received negative feedback from people that he walked past, things like that. They're like, man, this guy's a freak, that kind of thing, as they were looking at his face. And as a result, he created a mask. And then he uses comedy and humor in a very dark sense per se, to deal with, I believe, some situations that he's trying to deal with internally, including the fact that he's afraid to go back to see his girlfriend, right? Because he's afraid she might reject him because of how he looks now as opposed to what he was like before. And all this stemmed from the fact that he was originally diagnosed with cancer and felt he was going to die. So he was trying to seek out a way that he could survive cancer to be able to be with her for the rest of his life, right? I mean, that was kind of, the intent of what he was trying to do. And then he ended up looking different and being different from a physical perspective. But his psychology was there, but it changed. It changed because of how he began to perceive himself, how others from the outside were perceiving him. And granted, he was a bit of a asshole even when he wasn't. After his stuff. So what I'm looking at it, and I don't know if you ever watched MASH.
I actually did, yes.
From Vietnam, and it was a comedy, but it was comedic because they were finding ways to deal with the super intense situation that they had to deal with as emergency surgeons and doctors in the field hospitals during Korea. And I see some real similarities between kind of the mentality that they had and the way that they use comedy and the way that Ryan Reynolds uses it, or Deadpool uses it here. And then he chose to use a mask to cover up, and a thick mask, if you remember when they were saying because of the scar tissue and so forth. So they were talking about you need a thick mask. And what that begins to do is it hides the person behind the mask. It enables that person to sometimes not have to deal with what they're thinking, their mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I have this mask on, I'm kind of hiding behind it. But along with it, there's usually some sort of a depression, which he did have. He had some depression there. He had a significance thing that he was trying to achieve even before he underwent this process, where he was, like I said, kind of the asshole. And sometimes being an asshole is a way to be able to gain significance, as you are putting other people down sometimes in order to make yourself feel better. You are using your physical strength in order to overshadow others. um, it's everybody needs significance in life. Everybody needs a reason for being, and in something that they can feel good about themselves. But there are ways to get this significance that are not, they may be empowering from a power control perspective, but they're not empowering from an overall mental health and wellness perspective.
I can agree with that.
So, you know, comedians in general tend to use their stage presence as a way to cover up a lot of things that may be going on in their life behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this last week when we were talking about, um, how some of the funniest people in the world, like Robin Williams, um, killed himself.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of comedians that have done that. And then there are other comedians that haven't gone that far, but they talk about having to go to, therapists, psychologists, whatever, in order to be able to deal with the depression, frustration, humiliation. Oftentimes is the reason that they do this. By being in their normal life, they kind of feel humiliated for some reason, or they don't have the self-worth, and they use comedy in order to really kind of take the stage and control a situation, control something where they feel that they might be not be fully worthy of, and they're using comedy to be able to create a persona that does command attention. And they like to make people feel good, oftentimes because they're not feeling so good.
Right.
And these are really key points when you're starting to talk about masks and what masks sometimes cover up. Comedians also, and in the comedy and some of the lines that you hear in this movie and in other movies, they either are self-deprecating, making fun of themselves. I do that myself. And I'm not saying that all these are bad. I'm just saying that oftentimes, these are coping mechanisms, and they're also ways to, lighten up the situation, things like that. Let's not take that part of it away either. There's no doubt that, it's kind of fun to be funny, and to see a smile or people laugh, because that means that they're feeling good, and they may not have to be thinking about whatever is behind the scenes in their minds, right? And
Yeah.
oftentimes when we think about other people, we're actually projecting ourselves into them.
Correct.
So we're thinking that they're thinking like we're thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you start getting into that, you start projecting things that are not real. And that's what I like about this background here. Keep it real. Keep it real.
Mm-hmm.
That one there. Keep it real. Don't make it
I,
that is not.
I saw it, but I was like, when you pointed and then you pointed to his face on the other side without the mask, I'm like, well, now I'm confused because he's keeping it real there without the mask, but he's saying it there. I'm like, wait, which one's he meaning to point to? And then you said it, and I started laughing. I got that. So
Well,
yeah.
actually, in both cases, they're real. And when he recognized here that this reality wasn't what he perceived it to be, and his girlfriend came back and she admitted, yeah, it's a bit different. It might take a little bit to get used to, but then they kissed. And it
Yeah.
was not something that, turned her away from him.
Hmm.
So, oftentimes these things that we're thinking about and that we're masking either with a physical mask or with the way that we present ourselves in front of people, but when we go home, we're a totally different person. That can be manifested in many different ways, where you're happy-go-lucky at work. People go on stage, like we were talking about comedians, they're happy, but then they go home and they're depressed. They sit by themselves. They're not feeling worthy, but on stage they feel the love of everybody.
Hmm.
Um, at other times, you go to work and you're like the nicest guy in the world, and you come home and you beat the shit out of your spouse. Those things happen. And then you can take it even further. And I don't know if you ever remember a guy by the name of John Wayne Gacy, but
John Wayne.
Yeah, John Wayne Gacy.
All right, so John Wayne, I picture the old cowboy.
No,
So Casey is the part that throws me.
Gacy.
Gacy.
Yes, he was a mass murderer of children. But he went out and played a clown at children's parties. So these masks can mean many, many different things and manifest themselves in many different ways. So we need to really focus on ourselves and ourselves as leaders of ourselves and leaders of others, and recognize that what we see may not be what is really happening for ourselves. When what we see in the mirror may not be happening with ourselves, and what we see in others may not be happening for them the way that they appear.
So it's kind of just tying it together. It's almost like the social media effect. People always put their fake lives on social media. They only want you to see the happy. The people that get close to you and are in your inner circle are the ones that are seeing the real you, like Ryan Reynolds over there, or Deadpool, I should say. I think that needs to be made sure people understand. They can have a mask. It doesn't matter. Like, you and I've never met face to face,
Right.
and like the hour that we spend together a week, I mean, like, other than like random text here and there, which I need to get better at. My phone is in my hand so much that like it's hard for me when I put it down to just keep sending things. But like social media, I had a really hard time with a mental illness. I wanted everybody to think everything was always good, and I couldn't post unless I was sharing something positive or something negative that I could turn into a positive, so I felt better about me. But at the end of the day, I wasn't being me. I wasn't being true to myself. Is that kind of along the same lines? It's wearing a mask just in the digital world compared to the physical.
Absolutely. I think that it happens in all situations in life. In fact, I think it's becoming more rare that people actually are themselves, their true selves, than they are playing a role, whether that role be one of, I'm doing this because that's going to make mom and dad feel proud. I'm doing that because this is how my religious group feels we should be. I'm doing that because this is how I have to be at work. I have to play this mature leadership role at work, because if I do things that are weird, then people are like, what? Why would you do that? Why,
Yeah.
And it goes along with my shirt here, and my shirt being the happiest place on earth, Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
As a military officer, I'm wearing my uniform. I was wearing my uniform. I had my rank on my shoulder. People look at you and perceive you in a certain way, and you're expected to have a specific or a behavior that's becoming of an officer.
Okay.
Oftentimes that is more mature than I really wanted to be. And behind the scenes or in meetings and stuff, I would crack jokes and stuff. And I'll tell you right now, they were a lot of off-color jokes, but those are the ones that oftentimes are the funniest, at least for depending on the crowd.
Right. They're a perfect answer. Depending on the crowd. I'm like, I've made that mistake. Yep.
Yeah. So, it's as we grow up, as we get older and are expected to be mature, some people believe that we have to grow up, and I don't believe we have to grow up. Give me Peter Pan anytime. I don't want to grow up. If I could live at Disney World, that's where I would be. I could go to one of the 4 parks any day. I could, focus on different things. To me, that would be a blast. And then they have Pleasure Island where you can go drink a beer and have fun and do that kind of stuff too. Or they did. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been down there. But anyhow, okay, so this is kind of what masks can be, and what we see may not be what is real, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about more of, okay, how do we deal with this? And this is going to tie in with the tool. And the tool that I chose today, and see how you resonate with this, is not so much a tool, but a piece of hardware. A screw.
Ooh, okay. A screw. Oh.
Now,
I did not expect that. Go ahead.
you can either use that term, you're screwed, right?
Yep.
Has a connotation to it. Or a screw holds things together that are either supposed to be together or not supposed to be together, right?
Correct.
So it is something that can tie your reality to your perception. And I'm saying that perception in an individual's mind is reality, but perception is not necessarily the truth.
He keeps coming up here. Yes. I'm like trying to push him away, like calmly without it being a distraction. And then he keeps coming up the opposite side. Perception might not always be perceived as the truth.
Perception may not be the truth, but perception is your reality, an individual's reality.
Correct.
So those are some differentiations that we need to make. And the reason I choose a screw is that sometimes you're screwed because of the perceptions that you choose to tie to an event. An event tends to be reality, or the truth, I should say. Your perception of that event is your reality. So,
okay. Go ahead. So I get it, but I'm interested what you're going to say next, because I'm running with thoughts in my head to ask questions on. So go ahead, I'm listening.
Okay, so along with that, an event is just an event, and we don't most often have control over events or somebody's response to an event or something's response to an event. But we do have a choice of how we perceive the event or the response or whatever. It kind of goes along with pain. Pain may be mandatory. You may not be able to avoid pain, physical pain.
Yeah.
But suffering is optional and a choice. Now, you can screw the two together and live your life suffering because you experienced a painful event, or you can unscrew it or not screw it together at all and differentiate the two and say, this was an event, it happened, it was painful at the time, but I can choose to screw it into something more positive that I can live with in the present and will help my future, as opposed to suffering in the present with a disempowering perception that affects my future.
All right. Wow. I left my notebook downstairs. I regret that now. Okay. So I think that is genius, just so I'm clear how you put that. I want to be honest. That is a very, like, I've never thought of it in that term of how, when you think of a screw going into the wood, it's going in to take one piece and screw it into the other. And it's meant to hold them together because of the way it twists. It makes that breakthrough and hold everything. If we choose to hold on to negative situations in our life and we talk about them all the time and we keep bringing them up, you're not bringing yourself to a part where you ever take the screw out. You keep bringing up the pain. Yeah.
Tightening the screw.
Tightening the screw. Yes. You'll never be able to completely remove the screw and not have the hole. Correct? So how does somebody respond to being able to get better if they think their screw went deeper than somebody else's? And that was so perverted, and I was trying to avoid that. I've been
Yeah. Some people got longer screws than others, but that's beside the point.
I've been trying to think, how can I say that without sounding perverted? And I'm like, I'm going to use serious talk, Brandon. And then it comes out and I'm like, nope, still sounds like that's what she said. So never mind.
So look, you're right. There tends to be an initial perception of an event.
Mm-hmm.
And you're starting to screw things together, your perception and the event. And if you go into more of the suffering mode, you're screwing it in deeper and tighter. Or if you back away and you start to unscrew it, you can start to disassociate that immediate perception, which is a painful response to a painful event, and consciously choose to fill that hole with a putty, if you want to call it that is positive and empowering.
I like that. Okay. So I do have a question, because I get where you're going. It's smoothing it out. It's filling that hole. If it was screwed to hold two things together and you take that out, like you said, you filled the hole, but now they're not held together.
Which is good, because what tends to happen, and this is why people get into this suffering mode and they get into these depressions from things that happen, is that the perception is under our control. Okay. It's the meaning that we placed behind something, or it's the meaning that we chose to accept from somebody else that placed the meaning on the event. Now, we talked a little bit about this in some past episodes, but if you had a traumatic event in your life, with every let's see, how do I want to say, with every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. With every challenge, there's an opportunity. Now, you may have to sit down and really think about it, and you may have to reach out to other people to help to interpret what you experienced in a way that can be an empowering view of what happened. The pain of that at that moment, it's going to be there. You cannot erase that. That's where I personally don't have this big thing about, forgetting something, forgiving something, maybe so. Forgetting something, no. Actually, I say you probably shouldn't forget, because you can learn from it.
I agree.
Even if it's a traumatic event where you possibly lost a limb, because, well, I know one guy, he was our safety officer in a company that I was with. It was not the military, but outside the military. he was the safety guy, right? You know, going around and making sure that everything is safe in this industrial environment. But when he was off, he liked riding his motorcycles, and he had this brand new fast motorcycle, and he and his buddies were out, you know, tooling around and flying down streets that they shouldn't be flying down at this speed. And his rear wheel slipped on, you know, one of the painted center lines. You know, they're a little bit more slick than the rest of the road. He lost it. The bike went out from under him, but he's going like 70 miles an hour in like a 30-mile-an-hour zone. And he wrapped his bike and his legs around a tree. And he almost had to have both legs amputated. They were able to save the legs, but he would never be able to walk again. And he went through a lot of physical pain, and for a number of years suffering. Now what he does is he works with disabled veterans, taking an injury that he incurred outside of the military. He did have a military background, but this was outside the military that he experienced this, and be able to use that to help others to deal with their perception of their disability, and to make that disability into an ability that maybe they didn't even have before they experienced that event.
Wow, that makes sense. So go ahead. So tell me more about him. What was his name? Or if you're not allowed to say, don't, because I want to HIPAA law that in the government.
You know, I'll not say his name, but you know, it was something that happened within the past 15 years. But I remember when it happened, and it hurt me. It hurt me to the point, and now I regret this, where I was afraid to go in and see him in the hospital. I don't like to see people in that kind of pain, physical pain anyhow. But I also was like, God damn it, you did this to yourself. You didn't have to be this way. But, you know, we all make choices in life that are not always the best. I mean, I remember I was a second lieutenant in the Air Force. Finally was able to buy my own car, brand new car. It was a Dodge Shelby 2.2 Charger back in the, you know, early mid 80s. And I remember, you know, still as an officer, you're not supposed to be doing stupid shit, but you do stupid shit. And I remember going out and drinking, getting drunk, and driving to go get something to eat. And then I was driving home, and all this is like within 2 miles of my house, where I was drinking, where I went to get something to eat. And then ultimately where something happened where, you know, all I can remember is I opened my eyes and there was like a shitload of lights in front of me from all directions. And I like didn't know what was going on. It was like I was driving into headlights, and I cut my wheel and I jumped over a grass median in a divided highway, and was actually in the oncoming traffic then. And luckily enough, there wasn't anybody there, and I was able to turn back onto the median and get out of my car. So anyhow, I looked at my car. I didn't immediately see anything that was wrong with my car. I was only like a half a mile from home at this time, so I drove home, get out of my car, and I look, and I'm like, oh shit, I got a dent in one side of my car. I got a flat tire. I'm like, holy shit, what happened? And I'm freaking out. So here I am, this brand new second lieutenant, really in my first permanent duty station. And I'm like, my fucking career is over. So what do? I call the police on myself. I'm like, hey, I got in an accident. I'm not exactly sure what happened. Here's where it happened. I'm now at my house. I'm calling to report that I got in an accident. I didn't know. I really did not know at that time. The cops come to my house, pick me up, bring me back to the scene of the accident. And there was another car involved in the accident. Somehow when I cut my wheel, and this is kind of outside of the story, but now that we're in it, we're going to go through it. So I cut the wheel of my car, and somehow it's a 2-lane highway going in this direction, a 2-lane highway going in the other direction, and this grass median, right? When I cut my wheel, somehow I spun my car to where the rear end of my car, the rear back quarter panel of my car, hit the back end of a car in front of me going in the same direction. How fast I was going, what was going on, I cannot honestly tell you.
Okay. I was like, that's weird. That's like bam, bam. Like, how do you,
like,
that's,
you're going fast, you cut the wheel, you spin your back end around, it hits the car in front of you, you jump lanes, all kinds of shit. Luckily, nobody got hurt. Their car got less damage than my car. I didn't get hit by the oncoming traffic that I jumped into their lanes. All this stuff transpired, and then, you know, I ended up having to go to the police station, and then I had a court date and all that kind of stuff. And I got my tire repaired, and I drove my car to work. And my commander sees my brand new car with this damage, and he's like, "Is this anything I should know about?" And I was like, "No, sir, I'm dealing with it." And he was cool enough to not ask any more questions. He's like, "Okay." And, you know, this could have been the end of my career before it ever really started. I go to court, and the judge is like, you know, you got leaving the scene of an accident, you know, driving without your lights on, I don't know, and something else. And she's like, you know, like leaving the scene of an accident is a felony. Do you understand that? I was like, okay, yeah, I understand that. She says, how do you plead? I'm like, I plead guilty. She's like, wait a second. Turns off the recorder and says, do you really understand what this means? And then she explains what a felony can be and how it could affect your career and all that kind of stuff. And she's like, do you still choose to do that? And I was like, no. She's like, go get a lawyer. I was like, okay, I will.
Right.
And she turns the mic back on, and we finish out changing my plea. And so there's a series of bad things that happened with this accident, lucky things that happened that I didn't hurt anybody or myself, and lucky things that what could have ruined my career ended up being something that I learned from. Now,
Sure.
why do I tell all of this in kind of this whole thing is, okay, so here I am, an officer behind this officer's mask. I have people that I'm leading in the military. And a year later, one of my troops gets busted DUI coming through the gate. And normally a DUI, and I was DUI technically in this accident, except when I went home, I drank a few shots and therefore nullified the test for being DUI because I drank after the event, right? So he got busted, and he had a lot of things going on in his life. He had, in the process of getting a divorce, you know, his wife was kind of flaunting her stuff around him and her boyfriends around him and things like that at work. They both were in my unit, in my section. Anyhow, I brought him into my office and I said, hey, I was like, the only difference between you and me is you got caught. So learning from my experience, I'm like, you know, anybody could make dumb mistakes, bad judgment. And then, you know, it comes time for his annual review. And in that review, I rated him very well for all of his stuff at work, but I rated him poorly on judgment as the thing that happened that got him the DUI. And my commander calls me and he's like, I question your review on this person because you gave him a very good review overall. And I'm like, yes, sir. But I did mark him down significantly for judgment. And I don't feel that I should ruin a person's career over a mistake. So it was
You were fair.
experience for me that I was then able to relate to and translate into something to try to assist somebody who was having challenges and to avoid creating a bigger challenge for him by, marking him down to a point where he could have been eliminated from the military at that point in time. So
I really think that, so you learned from your lesson because of the judge giving you the fairness, and now you did that to him because he was in a bad situation. Like you said, the only thing is you got caught. For him to see that and understand that at the end of it, you're still giving your review of something that you're saying, I want to be positive, but you need to understand that there are consequences for the things you had. You taught him a lesson without him having to be suffering severe consequences for a one-night mistake.
Right. And he did have to go to, a alcohol rehabilitation program and things like that. That was part of what was just, part of the military at the time. But I was not going to ruin his career over an issue that happened, that essentially happened to me, and both my commander and the judge helped me realize that being a leader and making a mistake can go hand in hand, and then you can use that to help your team and others around you in the future. Just like today in explaining the story, I don't tell it to everybody, but
I appreciate you telling us.
It is something that happened. It's a reality of the event, but the perception that I could have had could have been far different than the one that I had. And interestingly enough, in that same unit, I had another first lieutenant that I worked with, and I thought he was a really cool guy. He ended up killing himself. And while we were there, he drowned himself in a pool and didn't really know why, but it ended up because his family had these big aspirations for him, and being the first one to go through college, going into the military, and he made some mistakes, and he felt so terribly about those that he chose to take his life, as opposed to recognize that an event is an event, but your future is your future. That's where I say be in the present, because the present is where the past and the future meet.
Mm-hmm.
And don't hide behind a mask. You need to recognize these things. You need to recognize and take control over your thoughts and your processes and your actions in the present, to build a different future than one that may have been one you were following in your past. Take that mask off, be real, be real, be real, be real. And have a heart. And that heart has to apply to yourself too. Bring that heart in tight to you, because the first person you need to have empathy and sympathy for and understanding for is yourself. So let's not, hide behind the mask, and recognize, even in the movie, he changed the way he looked, but his girlfriend didn't change the way she felt. But he thought she would. So he tied his own perception and projected it on her, which kept him away for 2 years. Was painful for her that she thought he just disappeared on her, and she knew that he was supposed to die because he had cancer. That's all she knew when he left. And he actually created a bigger hardship for himself and for her, because he was afraid because he projected his own perceptions on the reality of a situation and tried to say that what he was thinking is what the other person's thinking. And that's most often that's not the case. Everybody's got their own beliefs, their own histories, their own perceptions. And even though you and I may think very similarly about a certain thing, our belief system, our perspective, or whatever. Even though we're similar, we're not exactly the same in exactly how we apply that meaning to something. And that's something that we cannot project even on somebody that you think is thinking the same way you are. They're thinking of it in a little bit different way, and sometimes in a lot of bit different way than you
Yeah.
are. Even though you think you are, in the same mindset. So, um, you know, these are ways that we can help to overcome this reason why we may be putting a physical or a figurative mask on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
How we're projecting, things that are behind that mask onto somebody else that isn't thinking that same way. Um, we need to um, oftentimes refocus away from me thinking to we thinking. And in we thinking, you also have to be cognizant of kind of group think and how that could potentially take you down a path that is not me think, right? You join a group, you think it's a bunch of cool dudes that you're hanging with, and then you come to find out that they're into something that you really don't like, but you stay along with it because you want to be with the cool dudes.
I think I did that in high school.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. And then you've got to come back to, in that case, me thinking, refocus on me. And is it truly me, or is it them that I'm really trying to impress and not myself? So, kind of three mandates for leadership, or kind of going through this too, that can help people would be, and leadership, being leader of yourself as well as helping or leading others, is see it the way it really is, whatever that event is. The event is an event. You can't change the event, but you can change the meaning. So that's the first one. See it the way it really is. See it the way you want it to be. So, what is it that I have to change in my belief system, my actions, my thoughts, in order to make this event more empowering or beneficial to me?
Right.
And then three is actually take those actions to control or choose the new meaning that you're going to apply to that event. The actions that are going to demonstrate this change, because it's not just about changing it in your mind. You are also going to physically demonstrate those in your life. And when you do that, you will move in that direction. And pretty soon, that painful event that you had this disempowering meaning really starts to fade into the dark. And that future and that brightness that is coming because of this new meaning that you have chosen because you saw it, it's your new vision, and your actions are taking you in that way, allow you to grow in the future. That's, that's how we can take that mask off and really, or if you are a superhero, you can keep the mask on, but you stay true to yourself.
Yeah.
You stay true to yourself. And true to yourself is how you reduce stress. When you have incongruence between your actions or your beliefs and how, what actually happened, because oftentimes your subconscious knows what really happened. It knows what your conscious mind has placed on it, or your perception, and there's stress. And that stress, sometimes you don't even know that it's being caused by this. So you have to dig deep in order to find out why you're having this kind of stress. But stress also brings dis-ease in your body and eventually disease to your body. So you really want to focus on that stuff. And being behind that mask is usually, if it's a false mask, is one where you are living a life of stress.
Mm-hmm.
And that frustration, that um, that emotional pain and stuff comes out in many different ways. It could be in physical activity. It could be, you could positively use it in sports, and, you could be the best damn lineman in the world because you're just taking out your aggression through that sport, which is helping you to become more congruent internally. But when you have that kind of stress, you need to also know how to turn it off. You need to be able to balance yourself. You need to take that stress out of your life. That takes your body chemistry, your mind, your brain chemistry back into balance, and everything in life becomes much more enjoyable and empowering because you have chosen to lead a more balanced life between your belief systems, your mindset, your heart, your soul,
Mm-hmm.
and your vision. So I think that, overall, this was a great movie for me to watch because I saw it in this. At first, I was like, man, this could be really, really depressing. And then I'm like, okay, well, this is not something that is unusual for people to experience. So let's figure out, first of all, bring out what I felt in terms of the the depressing parts of it, and let's talk about some ways that we can get unscrewed or unscrew
Yeah,
ourselves. Because most of the time in our lives, when we get screwed, the person turning the screwdriver is ourselves.
I agree. I agree. So I think that I love how you did this, and I love that you brought like a totally different perception of how to handle this. For the I keep it real mask that he has on there as Deadpool to then being Deadpool removed and seeing the true love. You defining the screw and keeping it together and then being able to explain, like when you do understand, you get your real you're putting the putty on and you're filling that hole and you're balancing it back. I I love it. I think that a good way for people to remember is before you get screwed, take a moment to do that, like you said, to balance yourself, to take a moment for yourself and be alone with yourself, to be able to reset you. If you can't get that moment, you need to take a moment to breathe. This weekend, I saw my niece. My niece is 8, so she's a kid, but I saw her mimicking my sister's reactions on things, her mom. And her mom freaks out on things very easily and talks a positive game, but doesn't show it. I love her to death, but she turned around and my niece, anytime she wants anything, she can go off the handle in a second. And for her, I watched her keep doing that. And at one point, I took my meditation bracelet and she would cry if she didn't get what she wanted. She's 8. She's already figured this out. And I'm like, like, I get it, but that doesn't work on your uncle. I'm not around you enough for me to feel sympathy on you in this when you did something wrong.
Yeah.
So she's crying and I walk into her room where she's crying and I take off my bracelet and I put some oil on it that has like an orange smell to it, but it's like meant to be calming.
Yeah.
And I just told her to hold it in her hands and rub the oil in and take a moment to breathe and like just smell how nice this smells. And she's all in there and loving it and all that. And like, she's like, this smells really good. And I go, then why are you crying? And she's like, because, and she starts explaining. I'm like, oh, no, you have to breathe through this. Like, I'm not going to let you get the, no, that's fueling the wrong fire.
Right.
We're going to reset this. So I think that people like, I'm using my niece and I love my family. I got to admit, this has been one of my favorite Christmases ever with my family. It's at the same time, family is always going to be family,
Right.
And they saw the best of you and saw the worst of you. They don't mean it in a bad way. They just, when everybody else sees something special in you, that doesn't mean your family doesn't. It just means you've had it all along and they didn't notice. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not, or maybe they did, but they didn't know how to use it because it's not their gift. I love my family and I've seen some amazing things with them, but with this episode, I think it's great that you gave it another shot with Deadpool. To see people really let go of the mask is a big thing, and that moment to breathe, to keep balance, because you might not know you're even putting a mask on and screwing it on tight, but at the end of the day, like I picture him when he puts his mask on, like imagine him, you're putting your mask on and screwing it in the back of your head. So before you start tightening those screws, before you start pushing those things, take a moment to reset and see, is this a reason I need my mask and my other self? Or is this a reason that I need to take this off and be merely me?
Yeah, I got two more things I'd like to really kind of bring up as some techniques for
Go.
people. One is oftentimes we get overwhelmed when we start talking about trying to change these types of things, change our perceptions, change our belief systems, change our meanings, change our actions. So, I talk about an event is just an event, or an action is just an action. If you want to change and not be overwhelmed by it, break it down into what might be considered micro events or
Okay.
micro actions, a little bit at a time. You didn't learn how to run by running. You learned how to run first by being able to stand up, then to be able to put one foot in front of the other. Baby steps, right? Then you learned how to take bigger steps. Then you got balance and you started to learn how to run. Take it in micro chunks, break it down and say, okay, this was a huge event in my life. It was really hard on me. I've been living with it for all this time. What can I do right now? Right now, that's just a small little thing. I changed the word from how I describe the event from it's killing me to it's annoying me. And don't ever go back to it's killing me. Always it's annoying me. And it will change your view or perception of what happened. Another thing is to declutter your mind. And when I say that, it is, sit back and really kind of prioritize what's really, really important in your life and what the bullshit important is in your life.
I think that's a
And
good point.
then put that bullshit stuff off to the side. When you got a little bit of time, you can think about that. But put those really big things like changing your perception on an event that was so traumatic, make that something that's priority. And you won't be so overwhelmed because you've got 80 million things you're trying to deal with. You're only trying to deal with 3 or 5 or 10. And all the
Yeah.
rest of that stuff you're going to kind of deal with later on or not put a lot of energy and effort into it. That'll help to enable you to empower yourself without being overwhelmed. And you should do that kind of if you can. And I know I have a hard time, but on a daily basis, just when you wake up, it's like, what are the key things I need to focus on today? What are the key things I need to get done today? The rest of that stuff, I can do that later.
Yeah.
Then on a weekly basis, do that. And especially on the daily and weekly basis, at the end of the day, think about what you have accomplished. Celebrate that because
Yeah.
oftentimes what we do is we accomplish a lot of things, but we only remember the
Yes.
things that we didn't.
Yep. That's
And
a
as a
very
result,
good
we
point.
come out of a day that was productive and feel like shit because we think this is what I didn't get done.
Yeah, I agree. And that you got to take the little, and when you don't, like you said, the baby steps. Um, Maybe you didn't get the meeting for the big meeting you wanted, but at the end of the day, you got the emails out, you got the connections there. They've responded. You're not catching on to what's really there. You know what I mean? Like see the baby steps that took you to get there.
Right. And recognize, sometimes life takes a different course than you originally thought. You were planning on getting this big meeting done, and all of a sudden, a friend has a real traumatic event happen in their life. You
Yep.
choose to go and help them, recognizing that you're not going to get this other thing done. And then you can come back and say, well, I didn't get this shit done. Well, did you help that person that you weren't even expecting to happen? Those are not things to beat yourself up on, but to actually recognize that, yes, I did accomplish something. It may not have been what I set out to do, but I did accomplish something. And tomorrow I'll focus again on what I need to do. So, timelines can extend and the
Mm-hmm.
course may change, but if the vision stays the same, you'll get there. You'll get there. And I'll kind of wrap this up a little bit, if it's all right with you, with just a quote that I found in from Shakespeare, and I'm going to twist it just a little bit. The quote from Shakespeare is, "We know what we are, but we know not what we may be." Now, I don't know that I like that so much, so I change it to say, we think we know what we are, and it oftentimes holds us back from being what we can be.
Hmm.
So again, the meaning and the perceptions that we place on things, what we oftentimes think we are is not what we are. Our belief systems are not what they are. Our perceptions are really not ours. Our perceptions are not things that we actually chose. We just ended up with them. So we think we know what we are, but have you really thought about it internally? Have you really gotten to be congruent? And then once you recognize that, are those things that you think you are holding you back, or is there a reality, a congruency after you get congruent, that really that you can go much more, you can be more than you can be, as the
Yeah.
army says. um, um, then by just looking internally and really recognizing where you're at. And the last thing, and I know you mentioned it, I mentioned it, but don't be afraid to ask for help.
Boom.
There are friends out there, and make sure they're really friends. And sometimes your friends, if they're really friends, are going to tell you things you don't want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to look for those sometimes professional resources, whatever, to help you to get through some of these challenges, because we don't know all the answers ourselves, and oftentimes these are very challenging things that we're talking about. That's why I work with leaders, I work with people that are trying to figure out how to make life better, how to make work better, how to get through challenging times. And the very first thing that we really have to define is who you really are today, and then who you really want to be. And then we start working on the perceptions of those things and the actions to get you there.
I love it. I love it. This was a great one, buddy. Like, I did not know I did not know you haven't seen Deadpool. So I was going into this like, oh, he knows what he's going to be talking about already. He's going to be good. To hear this afternoon you say, oh no, I was watching it. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I've probably seen all of them a few times just because I don't like, it's just one of those movies for me. This was really good, and I think that we hit a lot of points that people don't really see in themselves or catch in that movie, and how to handle that. I I feel like this is almost more of a screwdriver than the screw, just because that's what you're using to tighten yourself,
Sure.
and you're the one choosing that. So that's why I'm like, I was sitting here and like the whole time I'm listening, I'm like, this is like, I agree, and the screw is what's going in and combining everything. But as well as I do, yep, you can't do that without the screwdriver to be able to actually keep tightening it. So
You turn the
you can't,
screwdriver one way or the other.
exactly. You are like just a pest today, kid.
No, he
Um,
needs to be up on stage.
oh, he is an all black cat. He's like a blue-haired cat is what they call it or something. It's Sarah's cat. And the reason his name is Kid is because whenever anybody asks us, when are we going to have kids? We already have one.
Okay, there you go.
He is my cat and a half, even though he belongs to her. This cat's favorite place to be is either on my lap or on my shoulders. And I did an episode recently. He jumped up when I wasn't expecting it and just slept on my shoulders, and I just left him there because I'm like, that's who he is. Like, he is in his happy place. It doesn't bother me, and it's just calming. His breathing is very calming for me. I love this cat. Brett, this was a great episode. Do you have an idea who you want to do next week? Or is it my turn to pick one?
I say, why don't you go ahead and pick one? I mean, I know you picked Deadpool, but then I skipped and put one in between there. So if you got one, let me know, and then we'll work with it.
You know what? I'm gonna pick one, and then I will tell you what movie to watch. Okay? And then I have to be responsible for providing what tool it's going to be next week. That way we switch it up a little. How's that sound?
That sounds awesome.
I love it. I love it, and I look forward to it. So I always bring us in and take us out. Let me have you do it this time, because this was a great one, and that way we have fun with this. Because I don't need to be the first one to talk. You have a great voice.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for being here and spending the time with us. We really do have a big heart, and we're trying to extend that to each other and to you as well. So bring that into yourself, use it. This is Brett Gordon of Businesses Are People Too, and Brandon Croucher of Delight Cafe. And this was and will be One Square at a Time.
Thank you, Brent. Yeah, I'll talk to you later, buddy. I'll text you this week. Let's try to maybe like just have a fun conversation, just chat back and forth. I know it's usually my thing. I've been restructuring my schedule like you and I talked about in last week's episode. Today my team even said I was in a different mindset. Like I looked like I was like, do this, get this, do this. And then I made them all sit at their computers and write out what we were talking about them to do. And they had to answer questions. So I made everybody get a lot more organized, because I'm not exactly the most organized, as you know. I tested in that category of crazy. But at the end of the day, it's, if I can't lead with how it's supposed to be done, I need to reset myself. And that was something that when you and I's conversation, it was already in my head. And I felt like that whole episode was like pushing at me. So Brett, I really appreciate all that you're doing and being willing to be here with me and do this. So I have a surprise for you. Can you unrecord? Because I can't have it be on the recording.
Okay, well, then I will be signing off or unrecording here. Let me go ahead and do that.
I think if you just go to the recording when you just